Welcome to Friday's ESPN FC Live. Mark Donaldson, Shaka Hislop with you. We're focusing on the Premier League today. Later on in today's ESPN FC Live, we'll be focusing on the title contenders and how they all match up against each other and their games this weekend. But we're going to start like we usually do these days on ESPN FC Live with Manchester United and with Erik ten Hag. We've spoken a lot about it, so I want you to hear from the man himself. First of all, a quote from last Thursday where he was talking about, how do we score more goals? And then after 3 goals scored last night, he was talking about how do we concede less goals. This is what we're working with.
Not scoring goals, or not scoring goals enough. That's the problem. It's the key area.
1, 2, 3 plays switching off, then it's a problem, and that is what we have to solve. And we just start the season, so we have time to solve this issue, but it has to go quickly.
So, Shaq, when you've got a problem or a puzzle to solve, whether it's in a newspaper or online or whatever, you've usually got a time limit needs to be solved by. Milk in your fridge has got a best before date, needs to be used by. What is the needs to be solved by date of Erik ten Hag, and what is the use by date of a manager that says we still have time and we still have issues and problems to solve?
Well, that kind of depends on whether you're asking my opinion on that or whether you're asking Erik ten Hag's. And I have a sneaky suspicion that we'll be somewhere 9 months separate in that. If you were asking me when the sell-by date for Erik ten Hag is, or more to the point, was, I would say early June. If you're asking Erik ten Hag, he's got some time yet. And that's just the kind of disparity of where we are. And listen, no manager ever thinks they're about to get the sack. We had this discussion earlier in the week on ESPN FC that every manager thinks that it's just one tweak, it's just one game, and I get this right, and we'll be off to the races. When you're either a player in that dressing room or as I am now, kind of sitting separately, it looks an awful lot different. And I have to say, the more I hear Erik ten Hag speak, the more I see Manchester United play, the more we see decisions like Erik ten Hag made last night, the more I'm feeling that, somebody at some point, to use your analogy, is going to open the fridge up and realize, hold on a minute, this milk is absolutely no good. And it can only be a matter of time.
You said your opinion and Erik ten Hag's opinion of when it should just be kind of put out of its misery is very different. Someone whose opinion holds a lot of sway is a man who purchased 25% of the football club. Now, he's been speaking to BBC and their sports editor, the excellent Dan Roan. That, Shaka, is not a ringing endorsement when he was asked about Erik ten Hag's future, is it?
No, it's not. But I take a slightly differing view, albeit maybe I'm in the minority here on Sir Jim Ratcliffe's comments. And I think what he's trying to do is separate himself personally from the footballing decisions at the football club. Now, we can question Manchester United's kind of demise, maybe that's a strong word, around decisions that were made or not, as the case may be, and the people making those decisions. And I think what Sir Jim Ratcliffe is trying to do is recenter the footballing decisions on the footballing people at the club. And I think that's a clever thing to do at this point, given the issues that Manchester United have endured, some of the decisions that seen them in this place. Maybe at a time where Erik ten Hag is absolutely desperate for a ring endorsement, it doesn't come. But again, for me, I'm seeing this more big picture and more Manchester United having to recenter some of those decisions with the people that they brought in to make exactly those decisions. So I'm a little bit on the fence.
Who brought these people in? The answer is Sir Jim Ratcliffe. He's the paymaster, okay? Now, he's a very, very successful businessman. And what you find in business is that the top men and women in business get there because they're good at what they do, because they delegate the decision-making underneath. And ultimately, they have the final say. So if the people he brought in that will ultimately have a hand in making the decision about Erik ten Hag's future see that quote, and Jim Ratcliffe didn't have to speak to the BBC today. He's broken his silence. He's chosen to do that. So if you're Wilcox or any of the others and you see that quote, does that influence your decision-making as to, hold on a minute, our paymasters are kind of saying, you're not backing him, so maybe that needs to be us to get rid of him?
If I'm in that position, the answer is absolutely no. It doesn't affect my decision. I'm paid to do a job, and I do it with the data that's available to me or relevant to me. So Jim Ratcliffe is trusting me to make decisions not based on what he says. As a matter of fact, he's brought me in to make footballing decisions based on footballing facts. I think part of that statement, the broader interview with BBC, which I thought was also telling, is so Jim Ratcliffe mentions, and didn't have to, that the people brought in to the football club to make these decisions were there in February, March, and April. And I think he kind of is making that point that, maybe I'm reading a little bit too much into it. Maybe I'm trying to read Sir Jim Ratcliffe's mind. But given the fact that I'm firmly in belief that the only reason Erik ten Hag is there as Manchester United manager right now is because they won the FA Cup, an FA Cup that started in January, in the third round, and Manchester United, at times limp their way through, and I'm thinking of the Coventry tie, but at times they upset Liverpool, they upset Manchester City in the final. So he's making the point that the things that kept Erik ten Hag in the job, they weren't there. The decision makers weren't in place at that point. So again, which is why I think this statement for me is a whole lot broader than there's no ringing endorsement. What does that mean?
All of us are looking for different angles because there's only so much that you can talk about Manchester United and about Erik ten Hag, but we seem to finding different angles. One of the ones I was looking at, and this is the geek in me, I went back and had a look at Manchester United's share price. And I went back and looked at the spikes in Manchester United's share price. And I found November 2022. So I was like, okay, that was when Ratcliffe that was when the Glazers said they would sell.
Yeah.
And there was a big spike from 13 to 21 billion. Per share, $13 to $21 per share. And I think Ratcliffe came in and paid, I think, around $33 a share to value the club at 54.1 billion. The point I'm trying to make here is good news for this football club means that their share price goes up. And there's talk this week, among others, saying, well, it's going to cost 13 million to get rid of Erik ten Hag, and it's going to cost about 17.5 million to get rid of his whole backroom staff. Yes, sounds a lot, but it's a drop in the water, isn't it, to a team and a club that is valued at over $50 billion. And when you get a piece of positive news, that 17 million, is a drop in the ocean.
Yeah, it is for all intents and purposes. But to be honest, I'm not sure who pays 54 billion, and I'm trusting your valuations on this for Manchester United. Kind of given where we were in November of 2022 when the Glazers were talking about selling the club, and there was a sheikh, I think, who bid. I think it was somewhere around the 6 billion mark. But anyway, I'm going on a rabbit hole that I don't fully understand. In all honesty. But yes, to your point, it is a when you talk those valuations, everything is a drop in the bucket. 100 million for Anthony is a drop in the bucket. Yeah, nobody can argue that was money very poorly spent. And 13 million to get rid of Erik ten Hag, yes, that's a drop in the bucket. But I'm still bemused as to why his 1 year extension was triggered a few months ago. Nobody was coming in for Erik ten Hag. I don't think there was any real need for that. So, but again, I am not the football club owner. Some of those dynamics I don't fully understand. But from a footballing perspective, it made absolutely no sense to me. But in managing those billions, you've got to be careful with some of the millions, because while it may cost you that to get rid of Erik ten Hag, what does it cost to then bring somebody else in? And will they be looking at Ten Hag's compensation and saying, well, listen, if that's what you're paying, or willing to pay up somebody who broke all the wrong records for Manchester United over the last couple of years, and you want me as a big name manager to give my own successes, whoever it may be, I'm going to assume that it's somebody who's had successes, give my successes, this is what you have to pay me. So a lot of these things, again, simply do not happen in a vacuum, and there will always be a bigger context to some of these decisions.
Yeah, and to put the financial in context, because I want to talk about Villa on Sunday, Manchester United's next game. He had to pay that amount, Sir Jim Ratcliffe, for 25%. The whole club is not valued at 54 billion. That is what he had to pay, that valued the club at that. And just a minute ago, the share price was $16.09. That's less than half of what Sir Jim Ratcliffe paid per share to get his 25%. So that's just to put a cap on that. Football's about timing. Could this be the worst possible time for Erik ten Hag to face a team like Aston Villa, given that there's an international break after that and there's a little bit more wiggle room to make a decision? Is it Villa or bust for Ten Hag on Sunday if they don't win or don't get a point?
Again, you're asking the wrong man, because I thought
I don't have access right now to Ten Hag or Ratcliffe, so you're my expert.
I thought it was bust a long time ago. But that being said, no, listen, yes, absolutely playing Aston Villa, this version of Aston Villa, and we cannot sing Unai Emery's praises highly enough for the job that he's done since taking over from Steven Gerrard. At a time where you have the club's biggest result, arguably, in the last 20 years, if not more. I think we're going back even further than that in the Peter With winner against Bayern Munich. Absolutely yes. If I'm looking for a positive out of this, I'm looking at Newcastle as an example. Just over a year ago, Newcastle beat PSG at St. James's Park. And the following weekend suffered a little bit of a hangover, the draw with West Ham. Now, given Villa's results and the magnitude of it against Bayern Munich, maybe they'd be forgiven for having a little bit of a hangover this weekend, and maybe, just maybe, that plays into Manchester United's fortunes. That being said, some of Manchester United's problems, and you say, to one of your previous questions, we go looking for issues around Manchester United. Sometimes we don't go looking. Sometimes Erik ten Hag provides them for us free of charge. We were sat in the ESPN FC studio yesterday, recording the show, analysing Manchester United, taking along, about the 2-goal lead and how they let that go. And all of a sudden, mid-show, Kay says, we've just got Erik ten Hag's post-game press conference in. And he said that Marcus Rashford was taken off for rotational purposes, which, honestly, that was easily the dumbest thing I can think of a manager saying. No,
there's been a few examples.
Exactly. And now for all the criticism we've been able to mount, rightly or wrongly, whether you agree or disagree, Marcus Rashford, the form that we've seen from him in the first half, a goal, an assist, he had another one of those drinking runs where he coming from the left, and so somehow Porto were able to make a block. But regardless, that was the best we've seen of Marcus Rashford for 2 years, since that second half of the season, post the World Cup. Yep. And now all of a sudden, to some of the sound that we had with Erik ten Hag that we showed, You have Marcus Rashford in his best form for 2 seasons. You're in your best goal-scoring form that we've seen for some time. Højlund is finally shed of his injuries, and he's included from the start. That partnership is looking wonderfully well. Stick with it. Just don't tinker with that. Let that grow. Let that develop. You need that. You've been screaming out for that all season long. And what do? You make a rotational change at halftime? I mean, so to your point, if I'm a player sitting in that dressing room and I'm going to hold Ten Hag true to his word that it was for rotational purposes, I as a player have lost all faith in the manager. And I as a player now recognize that, listen, it's only a matter of time. The footballing people cannot see that and not take action. So you take that going into Aston Villa, even Aston Villa with a hangover. And maybe you won the FA Cup because Manchester City had a hangover. I don't see how Ten Hag comes out of this looking any better.
Okay, 3 things before we move on to the Premier League preview. You were 13 years old when Peter With scored that winner against Bayern in 1982. Secondly, we will need to get in touch with Apple to see if we can get Shaka-proof AirPods that don't overmodulate when you get passionate about something. And thirdly, that graphic, the full screen graphic at the bottom of the table, not the full screen, sorry, the lower third, is time up for Erik Ten Hag. That could be in use for quite some time on ESPN FC, and we'll keep talking about it because something's got to give eventually. Aston Villa against Man United will have live reaction on ESPN FC Live on YouTube on Sunday, straight after the game. The first game of the weekend, though, in the Premier League involves the league leaders. I want to make this a little bit broader as far as the previews and the analysis is concerned. Not just what do you think, Liverpool against Palace at Selhurst Park, but more so what we've seen so far and the title contenders, because Liverpool can extend their lead at the top against Palace, who've not been great this season. Eza's yet to get form. Defensively, they've looked a bit ropey. Will they fancy their chances at all against a Liverpool side that's going along nicely?
Probably not, is the short answer to that question. And listen, I think Liverpool have been far better. Oh, let me see. I wasn't quite sure what to expect of Liverpool. We know how good Liverpool can be at their best. We know some of the disappointments of Liverpool, and we've kind of endured that over the last couple of seasons. But a new manager coming in, succeeding somebody like Jurgen Klopp, you never know what you're going to get. And Arne Slot has kind of fit in wonderfully well. And credit to Liverpool. They are top of the table, deservedly so. I don't think you can question that. You can make a lot of the loss against Nottingham Forest. But as fixtures go, Liverpool have dealt with what's ahead of them, with one exception, wonderfully well.
Are they a better team on the road in the Premier League? They've played 3 and they've won 3, and they've scored more goals away from home than they have at home. Is their style better suited when the home team's kind of obliged to maybe have more of a go than just go to Anfield and sit in?
Maybe so. But still, as pleased as I am with Liverpool's start under Arne Slot, I don't know how good they still are. I still don't know exactly how good they are. For my money, I think the best 2 teams in the league are Manchester City and Arsenal. And I know right now Liverpool sit atop the table, and as I said, deservedly so. But then you look at those fixtures. As we speak right now, Mark, Liverpool's toughest opponent has been Nottingham Forest at 10th. And they're probably only 10th because of those 3 points that Nottingham Forest got against Liverpool. So they've not played anybody in the top half-ish, let's say, of the table. So while, yes, they're ticking along very nicely, they're scoring goals, they're traveling well, it's not been that difficult a test for them so far. That will come, and I think that we'll have a better idea of exactly how good Liverpool are. Saying that, if you're in the position that Liverpool are, if I'm a player in that dressing room, a new manager coming in, you couldn't pick those fixtures any better, where you want those easier games because winning just is such a boost in confidence. You feel that you can buy into what On the Slot is selling, and that pays huge dividends. Had it been a more difficult start and they lost their first game to Manchester City and their second game to Arsenal, who knows what kind of a conversation we'd be having around the very same Arne Slot.
Let's talk about the other two, the two you say that are still your title favourites ahead of Liverpool. They've got identical records. They've both won 4 and they've drawn 2. One of the draws was against each other. Manchester City drew last week at Newcastle and Arsenal drew at home to Brighton. Now, you can have an asterisk beside that. Yeah, they had 10 men, but that was stupidity from Declan Rice. Regardless of what you think on whether or not you think it was a soft one or whatever, he's delayed the restart. Referees are told that that's a second yellow card. So they had to play with 10 men for a chunk of that game, and they drew at home to Brighton. I don't think either have been at their best as yet, but that's not really easy to do at the start of the season. Who's been better so far from what you've seen in the 6 games that they've played, Manchester City or Arsenal?
I chose Arsenal to win the title this year before a ball was kicked, and I'm sticking with that right now.
Okay.
The reason being, I just feel that Arsenal are far harder to beat. I think City will score more goals, but at times, maybe that doesn't quite click. Maybe Erling Haaland, though I will say he's shown no sign of this so far, but maybe he has an off day. Who knows? Who knows what the issue may be? But I think given Arsenal's defense, given their defensive record, given the form of David Raya, and I hasten to add that because I have been more critical of David Raya than most, but I think as good as his defense has been, he has been outstanding and looked confident, looked a presence between the sticks that I don't think we saw at any point last season. I just feel that even when Arsenal aren't anywhere near their best, they still pick up a point. And that for me will ultimately prove to be the difference, I believe, to be the two.
And that's a really good point. I've just been looking, and it's something that I read earlier, and I want to bring it up right now. I think that since the start of last season, Manchester City have only kept 14 clean sheets in the Premier League. Now, listen to this, okay? Aston Villa, Luton, Wolves, West Ham, Ipswich, Brentford, and Arsenal. Those are the last 7 teams that have gone to the Etihad in the Premier League. They've all scored. You have to go back to, I think it's the end of March, the goalless draw against Arsenal. That's the only time that City have kept a clean sheet. And prior to that, it was Brentford in February. So yes, they can score, but Arsenal seem to be the team more likely to get the 1-0, even though it might be 2 or 3, because City will be like 5-1, 4-1. But what is the problem at the back for City? Why do so many sides with a really low expected goals still manage to go there and find the back of the net when they go to City?
And that's a tough question to ask. And I just wonder if it's because of how City play with their defense pushed very high up, that at times they get exposed at the back and teams know that they can sit in, they can frustrate and hit Manchester City on the break because their defenders get involved in their attack, and because John Stones will step out from his defensive duties into midfield. That there are opportunities there, to get at Manchester City. And I think this season, probably even more than most, you'll see more and more teams do that. I think one of the weapons that City use when teams sit in a very low block came in the form of Rodri and his ability to shoot from distance. Now we all know the Rodri stats and how important he is to Manchester City, but one of the reasons for that is his ability to shoot from distance. So you sit on your 6-yard box, for argument's sake, and you just crowd that 18-yard area and you don't allow Erling Haaland any space, they can tee Rodri up, and that draws your defense out. Now, without Rodri, and we've seen that. Without Rodri, I'm trying to remember who was it that Rodri got hurt against. Arsenal.
Against Arsenal, yeah.
There was nobody who kind of stepped out, and City were forced just to go from side to side, without ever really hurting Arsenal. And then they get that late goal, and obviously that changes how so much of the game kind of looked, but it doesn't change how it felt. That City were being frustrated, and for me, I think that may prove City's undoing, or more to the point, teams' abilities to maybe keep clean sheets, knowing that they're vulnerable on the counter-attack.
The other team I want to talk about, just to whether it's title contenders, they've started well, as Chelsea, but I want to do that in just a second. Just before we do that, Manchester City have got Fulham, Arsenal have got Southampton. Both should win this weekend.
Yeah.
They're both at home, but Fulham's a tougher game. Fulham are doing all right this season, 3 wins and 2 draws, just the 1 defeat up to 6th. They can maybe cause 1 or 2 issues for City, couldn't they?
Yeah, listen, I think Fulham are a good team, but the trouble is now when you think of City, you can't help but think of City at their best, and City at their best.
City the team
have
last
the
game against Brighton.
Have the bettering of Fulham without question. Will be a test, but I expect City to come through, and then Arsenal. I don't feel have any issues at all with Southampton.
Chelsea. Maresca says, no, we can't compete with Manchester City and Arsenal. He's indulging in the dark arts. They've been good going forward. I mean, defensively, yeah, at times you're like, okay then. But we spoke about Liverpool maybe being better suited to playing away from home, and some of Chelsea's performances on the break, certainly at Wolves, have been outstanding. So they play Sunday against Nottingham Forest. Have you liked what you've seen so far, to the extent that they could have a serious say in the title race without winning it for Chelsea?
I'm still not sure that Chelsea will have a serious say in the title race. I will say, though, I have loved everything I've seen from Chelsea. Yeah. And credit to Maresca. He inherited an absolute mess. And I thought he was in a hiding to nothing coming in there, that he was going to be a lamb to the slaughter. But I think that everything he's done, listen, and you could make a lot about, ostracizing players, and, we all aren't going to feature, this is the squad I'm working with, and I'm going to put some of these highly experienced, highly talented internationals to train with the kids because they aren't a part of my plans. That had huge potential to backfire. But Maresca's got it right. I have to say. To the point where he can make 11 changes for last night's game, and they win it. Listen, I'm hugely impressed with the job that he continues to do. He's getting a tune out of Nicholas Jackson, which I did not see coming. Everything he's done just seems to have worked. No. That being said, I still don't think that Chelsea are in the conversation around City and Arsenal. I don't think they're in the conversation around Liverpool. Maybe they do well enough to finish top 4. Maybe they're in that conversation along with a few others. I hasten to add, including the likes of Aston Villa and Spurs. But you've got to be impressed with how things have started for Chelsea so far this season.
One final question for you, and you've kind of preempted it a little bit there. Chelsea or Aston Villa? They're both on 13 points right now. Chelsea have got the Thursday night games where they can rotate and still win games. Villa have got the brilliant games at the Champions League against Bayern and the likes. Who finishes higher this season, Chelsea or Villa?
I am going to lean Villa still. But saying that, as much as I kind of bragged earlier about I chose Arsenal to finish top 4 before a ball was kicked, and I kind of still feel that way. I don't think I had Aston Villa in the top 4. Reason being Champions League exertions and an expanded field at that. And you're right. Chelsea have the luxury of being able to rotate, as we saw last night. But for all my praises around Chelsea and Maresca, I'm in love with Aston Villa and the job that Unai Emery continues to do. So maybe I'm following my head, or I'm following my heart more than my head, and saying Aston Villa above Chelsea.
So for today's highbrow ESPN FC, because where else can you get a live version of the word ostracized in a discussion about Chelsea? My thanks to Shaka Hislop, and a reminder that the big games this weekend will have full reaction ESPN FC Live on YouTube. I'll leave others to say YouTube. I will stick with YouTube. And a reminder, every Wednesday and every Friday, we shall not ostracize you. We shall bring ESPN FC direct to your Wi-Fi connection. For Shaka, I'm Mark. Speak to you soon.